It started with a missing girl and an apartment that no one could enter. They said she ran away, but the neighbors heard her crying every night, long after she was gone. No police report, no family, just silence. But I opened the door, and what I found inside was never meant to be seen. This is the story of the girl in apartment 14B, and the secret that nearly destroyed us all. Welcome to Detective Stories by Asma, where every case uncovers what others fear to see. This is The Girl in Apartment 14B, and her story starts now. When the first call came in, it was just after 1:12 a.m. A woman's voice, trembling, barely audible over the static of the storm. "There's something wrong with my neighbor. I think she's been murdered." The dispatcher tried to get more details, but the call dropped by the time officers reached apartment 14B. The door was locked from the inside. Blood. Blood was already seeping under the threshold. They broke it open, empty. No body, no sign of a struggle, just silence and single light bulb flickering in the hallway. It was 3 hours later when they called me, Detective Abner Ryan. By then, word had already spread. A young woman gone without a trace. Her name was Emma Lang, 23 years old, a student, quiet, kept to herself. I arrived just as dawn broke, rain still needling the pavement like it was trying to carve secrets into the concrete. Apartment 14B was eerily still, a kind of stillness that doesn't settle after a crime. It hangs in the air, thick, like smoke that doesn't fade. Emma's apartment was tidy. Our laptop was still open, paused on a meditation video. Our phone was on the couch. No forced entry, but the carpet beneath the couch was damp. When we peeled it back, red stains soaked deep into the floorboard, fresh blood. No, Emma. I canvassed the building, floor by floor, door by door. That's when I met Mrs. Halvorsen, the woman who made the call. A retired school teacher, sharp, well-spoken, but rattled, she screamed. Just once. I thought maybe a bad dream. Then, dragging, something heavy, like furniture, but softer, her voice cracked. She said Emma had been acting strangely for weeks, jumpy, worried, like someone was watching her. Next, I met George Pennington, resident of 14A, Emma's next-door neighbor. Mid-40s, divorced, maintenance supervisor at a local high school. She seemed calm. Too calm, Emma? Nice girl, quiet, liked books. I never really talked to her. Shame, though, really is. He didn't ask why I was there. He didn't even pretend to be surprised. Then there was Dr. Renee Carr, Unit 14D. Surgeon, cold eyes. Clinical mind, she was the last person to admit seeing Emma alive. Last week, in the elevator, she looked exhausted. Asked me if paranoia was a symptom of trauma. I told her to see a therapist. She left, but it wasn't funny. I began piecing things together. Emma hadn't disappeared. She'd been erased. He'd left no notes, no messages, no signs of packing. Her email was untouched. Her bank account quiet. Someone had tried to access her Wi-Fi router at 2:03 on the night she vanished. Back inside her apartment, I noticed something strange. The air was colder in one corner. Behind a stack of vintage records, pressed against the wall, I found a loose floorboard. Underneath, a diary. Pages torn, scattered. Each one sentence was legible, scrawled in red ink, her ink. If I die tonight, it was someone in this building. I held that page in my hand, and I knew. This wasn't a robbery. This wasn't an accident. This was a hunt. Someone had been circling and waiting. Over the next 48 hours, I interviewed the rest of the floor. A teenage girl and her mother, a lonely novelist, a foreign exchange student, And yet, no one heard anything except Mrs. Halvorsen. No screams, no struggle, no footsteps, as if Emma had been plucked from her home. Like a ghost, the ghosts don't bleed. The forensic team found a thin trail of blood behind the bathroom cabinet, leading into the drain. They dismantled the pipes. Inside the U-bend was a crumpled piece of paper. Bloodstain. It was a page from her diary. Only half a sentence was visible. I can hear him through the walls. He whispers at night. He knows when It ended there, ripped clean. I returned to the hallway and checked the building's security camera. The footage for that night? Corrupted. Static. Flickers of black and white. Just enough to make out a blurry figure in the corridor at 2 a.m. The timestamp blinked once. Then the feed. Someone had erased it. Digitally, physically, emotionally. They planned this meticulously. And then, I noticed something no one else did. Across from Emma's apartment, directly opposite the door, a small red light. A smoke detector. A camera, one no one had installed, one no one claimed, hidden inside the fire alarm casing. With a battery life of 10 days, it was recording inward, toward Emma's door. Not for safety or surveillance. The question wasn't just where Emma had gone. The real question was, who was watching her, and why? There was no forced entry. No screams from inside. The camera was active. Baby blood was real. The diary was hidden. Into the neighbors were lying. All of them. Someone had broken it piece by piece, emotionally, mentally. Then physically. And someone in that building was pretending they knew nothing. Huge monsters wear masks, especially the ones you live next to. As I turned off the hallway light and prepared to leave for the night, I saw something on the security panel. Something in it. A corrupted video file? It had re-uploaded itself, and a new name never left. The second day after Emma's disappearance began quietly. Too quietly. The police had come and gone. The yellow tape around apartment 14B fluttered in the wind like a warning. But behind the other closed doors, the building held its breath. Buildings like this, old, narrow, urban, are like people. They remember things. They absorb them into their bone, and this building had secrets buried in its walls. I started with Dr. Renee Carr, the surgeon in 14D. She opened her door with a practiced smile. "Detective Ryan, come in. I was just preparing a lecture." Her apartment was pristine. Every object had a place. Surgical instruments lined a glass case, not medical equipment, but souvenirs from her first surgeries. Bone saws, scalpel sets. Her bookshelf was filled with psychiatric textbooks. I study behavior. Human minds fascinate me. I asked about Emma. She was delicate. She flinched when people spoke too loudly. I told her once that paranoia is often a symptom of trauma. She didn't deny it, just said, "Someone is trying to unmake me." Unmake me. The phrase chilled. Renee paused, watching my reaction like I was part of her case study. People like Emma, they often crumble when exposed to too much light. I left her apartment with a chill down my spine. Not from anything she said, but from the way she said everything. Across the hall was George Pennington, the middle-aged man in 14A. He lived alone. His curtains were always drawn, and his fridge was nearly empty. A bottle of whiskey, some processed meals, and his closets were full, labeled boxes stacked from floor to ceiling. Receipts, newspapers, magazines, and at the very top, a photo album labeled Observations. It was full of candid pictures, street photos, park benches, strangers, and intimate. Dozens of photos of her walking to class, checking the mail, sitting on her balcony. Taken from afar, from above. "I'm a hobbyist," he said calmly. "I document people. For art, I stared at one picture. Emma, blurry, looking directly into the lens. Fear in her eyes. She knew she was being watched. I confiscated the album. Didn't resist. When I left, I caught him in the hallway watching me. Silent, still, and smiling. Apartment 14E belonged to a woman named Delia Monroe and her teenage daughter, Emma. Delia answered the door with a fake laugh, brushing flour from her hands. We're baking. Comfort food. You know how it is after all this. Her eyes didn't smile. The inside of their apartment was cluttered, many pictures. Too many trinkets. Too much noise. A cover for something deeper. I sat at the table, pale, scribbling in a notebook. Didn't look up when I asked about Emma. When I turned to leave, she whispered, "My mom says if you pretend hard enough, nothing ever happened." Later, I saw Mia slip a note under my hotel room door. Emma used to hide in our laundry room at night. She said someone followed her home. Mom told her to grow up. The laundry room was in the basement. No cameras, no lights. I went there at dusk, found a worn cushion tucked behind a boiler, a thermos, and a tiny worn book, The Little Prince. Inside was a name written in faded ink. Emma Lang. He'd been hiding there, terrified. Next was the top floor, Unit 15C. An author named Julian Crowther lived there, reclusive. British. Published one novel in the 90s, then vanished from the public. She invited me in with a drink and a soft accent. Everyone here's a suspect, detective. Even you. His apartment was dark and filled with books. The air scented like old leather and tobacco. He claimed he never met Emma, and his bookshelf said otherwise. One entire shelf. Women in isolation. Missing girls. Stories of paranoia, gaslighting, stalkers. I write what frightens me, he said. The fragility of safety. The illusion of knowing the people you live beside. I asked if he'd seen anything strange. Oh, detective. This whole building is strange. He looked out the window. But if you're asking what's beneath it, I'd check the maintenance tunnels. The basement of the building was older than the rest of it. Concrete, chipped pipes, rusted panels. I found the entrance to the maintenance tunnels behind a broken shelf. It hadn't been used officially in years. Inside, it was pitch black. The air stank of mold and rotting copper, with only a flashlight. I explored the tight corridors. One wall had tally mark, another, a child's drawing, faded with time, someone screaming in red crayon. Further down, a metal grate had been ripped loose. Behind it, an old maintenance locker. Inside, a collection of Emma's belongings. A scarf, a hairbrush, a single earring, and a tape to the inside of the locker door. A photo of sleeping in my hotel room. I staggered back. Someone had been inside, watching each camera. The hotel, the drawing, whoever had taken Emma, wasn't done. I returned to Emma's apartment once more, sat on her bed, closed my eyes. I imagined what she must have felt, surrounded by lies, drowning in silence, unable to trust a single soul in her building. Someone had been hunting her, living beside her, whispering through her walls, waiting for her to break. At that moment, my phone buzzed. It was the forensics team. They'd run a check on the corrupted security footage. It wasn't damaged. It was replaced. Someone had overwritten it with a loop. There was a sliver of original footage buried beneath the code. A single frame. A face, someone familiar, someone from the building, someone I had already interviewed. Into their eyes were staring straight into the camera. A face in the corrupted footage wasn't supposed to exist. According to the tenant registry, he didn't live in the building, didn't own a unit, wasn't a visitor. And yet, there he was, standing in the hallway outside apartment 14B at exactly 2:08 a.m. The time Emma disappeared, wearing a maintenance uniform, no badge, no name tag. Just a toolbox, gloves, and a calm, calculated stare into the camera. I ran his image through every database. No hits, no criminal record, no employee files, no social media. Nothing. He was a ghost, a man who shouldn't exist. I brought the footage to the building manager, an older man named Victor Klein. Retired military. Ran the place with military precision on paper. But in person, he was evasive, nervous, hands twitching as he adjusted his glasses. "We haven't had a new maintenance hire in years," he said, "and I've never seen that man before in my life." I asked for the original blueprints of the building, his eyes flicked too fast. "They're in storage. I'd have to look for them." But I already knew the truth. This building had been modified, and not by official hands. That night, I went to Unit 15A, an apartment registered as vacant. Someone had been living there, food wrappers in the trash. A mattress on the floor, a burner phone dead and taped to the wall. Blueprints, detailed, hand-drawn, of the building's vents, tunnels, and maintenance shaft. They weren't just for plumbing. They were for movement, secret, silent movement, from any room to any other. I brought the blueprints to Mia, the teenager who had warned me before. She went pale. "That's what Emma was talking about," she whispered. "She said she could hear someone crawling through the walls. She heard breathing at night, scratching, a voice whispering her name." I thought she was losing it. Emma hadn't been paranoid, and she had been watched, monitored, hunted. I returned to her apartment again, and this time I checked the vents. There, behind the grill above her bed, was a small camera wired to a battery, and behind it, a hollow space, large enough for a man to lie flat. To wait or listen, I crawled into the space. I stretched down the wall like a tunnel, and halfway through, I found something. A torn piece of Emma's pajama shirt, stained with teeth marks. Whoever was watching her had been closer than anyone thought. Later that day, the lab called back with another detail. The gloves the mystery man wore in the video? Industrial grade, latex-line, each same kind used in surgical procedures. Only one person in the building had access to them. Dr. Renee Carr. I returned to her apartment, unannounced. She didn't open the door right away. When she finally did, her expression was flat, motionless. "Detective, to what do I owe this?" Unexpected pressure, I asked about the gloves. "The blueprints, the tunnel access." It didn't blink. "Do you know what hysteria is, detective?" she said, circling me slowly. "It's when men begin to see patterns where there are none." But on her coffee table was a single page, one I recognized immediately. A page from Emma's diary. I reached for it. She placed her hand over mine, cold, controlling. "Be careful, detective," she said, smiling faintly. "This building has a way of turning everyone mad." I left with the page. It was a drawing, childlike, shaky lines. It showed a girl in bed, with black shapes crawling along her ceiling, and underneath, scrawled in frantic handwriting, "He climbs the walls when the lights go out." That night, I couldn't sleep. The deeper I dug, the more it felt like I wasn't chasing one suspect. I was chasing a system, a network of eyes and hands and lies, all wrapped in silence. In the early hours, a new message appeared on my phone from an unknown number. A video file. I pressed play. It showed the inside of a tunnel. A flashlight beam, heavy breathing, and then Emma's voice. "Please, stop. You're hurting me." Then static. Then darkness. She was alive. It had been alive longer than anyone thought. I traced the signal. It came from inside the building, from the basement, not the laundry room. Deeper, beneath the foundation, behind a door sealed with chain, Victor Klein had lied. There were parts of this building no one had access to except him. I demanded he open the door. His hands shook. "I tried to stop it," he whispered. "Years ago. I blocked it off. I thought it was over. I thought the house had eaten enough." "The house?" "No. The man inside you broke the chains, forced the door open. A narrow tunnel stretched downward. It turned rancid. And at the bottom, we found a steel room, soundproof, bare walls, no windows, and the center, a rusted operating table, empty, fresh blood pooling beneath it, and on the wall, written in red, "You're too late." But we weren't, because next to the blood was a footprint, and fresh. The door to the sealed chamber had barely creaked open before the air itself seemed to change, as if crossing that threshold meant stepping out of reality and into something darker, colder, and older than time itself, a place not meant to be discovered, not meant to be disturbed, hidden so far beneath the building that even the memory of it had been smothered by years of deliberate silence. We stood in that hollow tomb, the beam of my flashlight trembling slightly as it scanned the bare steel walls, stained with blotches too dark and too fresh to be dust. And what struck me first wasn't the horror of what I saw, but the horrifying absence of sound, the oppressive stillness of a place that had held screams so often it had devoured them whole and grown full on them. There, in the center, the operating table sat like a grotesque altar, rust eating away at its edges, leather straps frayed but still strong, and just beneath it, a dark pool of blood still glistened under my light, so fresh it hadn't yet dried completely, a clear indication that something or someone had been down here very recently, and may not have gone far. But what chilled me to the bone more than the blood was the tiny footprint beside it, smudged and stumbling, like a child had tried to escape, or worse, had been dragged away. We called for backup, of course. Protocol demanded it, but in that moment, protocol felt like an excuse for delay, and delay was something we could no longer afford, not with the overwhelming sense that the clock had already run out, that Emma's fragile grasp on life was slipping away with every breath we wasted standing still. I followed the footprints. They led through a narrow service tunnel, the walls pressing in tighter with every step, as if the building itself were trying to push me back, to force me out before I reached something it had worked very hard to keep buried. The trail curved downward into what must have once been a part of the city's forgotten infrastructure, a drainage system or bomb shelter, now overtaken by rot and secrets, and as I advanced, the air grew thick with mildew, but also something metallic, something sharp, something like the smell of fear. At the end of the corridor, I found a rusted door that wasn't locked but resisted being opened, as if it were held shut by time itself. With a final shove, it gave way, and behind it, I discovered the forgotten room. It wasn't large. In fact, it might have once been a janitor's break space or emergency storage closet, but it had been transformed, or rather, desecrated. The floor was lined with thick rubber mats, the kind used in wet rooms or surgical prep areas. The walls were covered with soundproofing foam, hastily glued, some pieces falling off, exposing concrete underneath smeared with what looked like bloody fingerprints dragged in long, slow arcs. A single flickering light bulb swayed from a cord above, and in its weak, trembling glow, I saw a series of cameras mounted in the corners, old, analog, but wired to a portable server in the corner. They'd been recording everything. Just Emma. Many others. I approached the server, powered it on with shaking hand. The screen came to life with a flicker. Folders, dozen, each one labeled with a date. Some from recent months, others going back years. And then I found one marked 14B. Inside, clips of Emma sitting on her bed, pacing the room, crying into her pillow, speaking to someone who was never visible. In some clips, she was speaking directly to the vent, pleading, "Please stop watching me. Why are you doing this? Just tell me what you want." There was no reply. Sometimes the camera shook as if whoever was filming was laughing. One file had no video, just audio. I played it. He said the building belongs to him now, that it listens to him. That if I scream, it'll echo back into me until I go mad. He said there's a room no one remembers, where you disappear, and keep screaming even after you're gone. I think I'm already there. At that moment, something shifted in the air behind me. A breath. No to mine. I turned sharply, just in time to see a shadow slipping past the doorway, deeper into the maze of forgotten tunnels. I gave chase, heart thundering, footsteps echoing in chaotic rhythm as I followed the flicker of movement through corridor after corridor, until the path split suddenly into 3 branches, and there, carved into the wall with something sharp, was a message. Only one leads to truth, the others to silence. I took the center path, ended in a chamber smaller than the last. This one had mirrors. Dozens of mirrors nailed to every wall, shards reflecting fragmented versions of myself, and in the very center, on the floor, was a small, childlike figure huddled under a coat. I knelt, whispered softly, "Emma?" She looked up. And in that instant, I realized it wasn't Emma. The girl from one more, terrified, eyes wide with shock. It reached out slowly and placed something in my hand. A photograph, faded, curled at the edges. It showed a young Emma, standing in front of this very building, with Mia's mother, Delia, holding her hand. I stared at the photo, then my tears streamed down her face, and when she finally spoke, her voice cracked like dry porcelain. She was my sister, and my mother lied. The photograph in my hand had begun to curl inward as if it, too, were recoiling from the truth it held, a grainy image of 2 smiling girls holding hands in front of the very building that now reeked of blood and silence, with one woman standing behind them, her arms resting protectively on their shoulders. Delia, my mother, and, as it now seemed, Emma's girl who had lived in apartment 14, the girl who had vanished, was not just a neighbor or a childhood friend, but family, a daughter. I sat with Mia in the narrow mirror-lined chamber, the sound of her sobs bouncing off the walls like ghosts reliving their pain, and when I gently asked her how long she had known, she whispered a confession so tangled in grief and confusion it barely sounded like truth. I always thought she was just a girl we knew from long ago. A girl my mother didn't want to talk about. She used to tell me that Emma's family moved away, that Emma wasn't well, that she needed help only a special place could give her. But I saw the letters. I found them hidden in a box behind the dryer. They were from Emma. She kept writing, even after we stopped answering. Each letter was dated, each one more desperate than the last. Emma had begged to come home, begged to know why she had been left. Her mother had dropped her off at a state institution when she was 10, and never returned. Delia Carr, a licensed psychiatrist, had used her credentials to sign Emma into a private psychiatric facility on the outskirts of the city, one that had since been shut down for ethical violations, including the use of experimental treatments and prolonged isolation of minors. The institution had been erased from records, and Delia had rewritten the past. She adopted Mia as her only child, buried Emma's name, buried her memory, and when the state closed the facility 5 years ago, Emma came looking for her mother. She came home to apartment 140. Emma didn't come back as a daughter seeking reunion. She came back changed, shattered, silent. The years had broken her, and what was left was a quiet, trembling shadow of the girl in that photograph. Delia hadn't let her in, hadn't acknowledged her. Instead, she sent her away, Emma stayed, didn't go far, took the vacant unit 14B across the hall, and from there, she began to watch. Delia, desperate to keep the truth hidden, had tried everything to push her away: anonymous complaints, psychiatric claims, even falsified building reports that claimed Emma was mentally unfit to live alone. But Emma refused to leave because she hadn't come back for forgiveness. She had come back for answers. It was at this moment that Mia, her voice shaking, said something that made my blood freeze in my veins. "There's another room. My mom showed it to me once. Said it was for emergencies. I think that's where Emma went when she stopped coming out." We left the chamber behind us and followed Mia through a long-forgotten stairwell tucked behind the laundry chute, its steps narrow and warped, the walls around it closing in like ribs of some great beast. At the bottom was a sealed wall, and I pointed to a panel I hadn't noticed before, disguised as part of the fuse box. Behind it, a code panel. He didn't know the numbers. But I did. I tried the date from the photograph. 17th March 2009. The day that picture was taken. A lock clicked into the wall. Opened. The hidden room was unlike anything we'd seen before. Clean, a clinical, stairway walls, fluorescent lights that hummed with artificial calm. It looked like a therapy room, but felt like a prison. In the center was a reclined, padded chair, surrounded by monitors and EEG sensors. Some still warm to the touch. Someone had been here recently, and then I saw her in the corner, sitting motionless, wrapped in a pale blue blanket, his wide, unfocused, hair unkempt, lips chapped. Emma. I knelt beside him, spoke softly, didn't flint, didn't blink, until Mia stepped forward and whispered one word: "Sister." Emma's lips trembled, tears welled in her eyes. And in that moment, her world began to crack open. He carried her in his stairwell into the light. We weren't alone. At the top of the steps stood Delia Carr, now white, coat stained at the sleeves, her face a pale mask of calm, cracking at the edges. She didn't scream, she simply looked at me, then at Emma, and said the words that would echo in my head for years. "You don't understand. I was protecting her. The world doesn't know what she is." I asked what she meant. What had Emma done? Delia stepped forward, hands raised, not in surrender, but in confession. "Emma didn't come back to find me," she whispered. "She came back because she never left." And then she opened her hand. Inside it was a key. Oh, rust-stain, labeled only Lower East Wing Archive. That wing had been sealed for over a decade. Whatever waited behind it was the reason Emma had been hidden, the reason Delia had erased her from the world. I felt cold and oddly heavy in my hand, as though it carried the weight of history, of trauma, of a truth that had spent too long clawing against the walls of silence. Lower East Wing Archive, a part of the building that had been sealed off since the early 2000s, just locked, condemned. I descended the last flight of stairs with Emma on one side, silent and trembling, and Mia on the other, gripping my coat tightly, her eyes darting to every shadow as if they held the ghosts of memories too terrible to name. Delia didn't follow. I stood at the top of the steps, watching, her face unreadable, her lips moving in silent prayer, or perhaps silent warning. The lower archive wasn't just hidden. It was buried behind a steel door rusted at the hinges, with wires dangling from torn panels like exposed nerves, and on the other side, a tunnel that smelled of mold, rust, and forgotten things. As I stepped into the dark, my flashlight flickered once, twice, and then stabilized. The beam cut through layers of dust and time, and what it revealed was nothing like I had expected. Rows of filing cabinets stretched into the gloom like pews in a long abandoned chapel, each drawer labeled with patient numbers, not names. The air was dense with mildew and the scent of aging paper, but also something sharper. Something like formaldehyde. I found the file, a note by number, by instinct. A thick folder wrapped in faded red twine tucked at the back of a locked cabinet. On the cover, written in blocky typewriter ink. Case file, EM87B experimental monitoring subject. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't a psychiatric file. It was a research dossier. Inside were documents stamped with logos from private medical corporations, psychological think tanks, and a defunct government branch specializing in behavioral manipulation in minors. Emma hadn't been committed, had been selected for something called the Silent Mirror Protocol. The program's core premise was disturbing: isolate children showing unusual psychological behavior, extreme empathy, sensory sensitivity, intuitive cognition, and study the long-term effects of controlled environments, auditory distortion, and mirror-based isolation therapy. They believed children like Emma could be trained to sense, even mirror, the emotional states of others in real time, that with time, they could be turned into emotional receivers. Human feedback loops, people, instruments. Emma had passed every trial. It began responding to pain in others before it happened. Began mimicking emotions so precisely she could break adults into tears with a single gaze. Our connection to others wasn't empathy anymore. It was intrusion, violation. It didn't just feel what others felt, it absorbed it, and over time. She forgot which feelings were hers, which voices were hers. When the experiment was shut down after a whistleblower leak, most children were relocated. But Emma, perhaps because of what she had become, was sent here, to this building, be monitored and controlled by none other than Delia, her own mother. Delia hadn't abandoned her daughter, had imprisoned her, claimed it was protection and truth. It was containment. I found one final page, a test report dated just weeks before Emma's escape. Subject EM87B now shows signs of full emotional projection. Has begun influencing others unknowingly. Mood instability in neighbors noted. Subject's presence in shared buildings may trigger psychological mirroring among vulnerable individuals. Recommended course of action: relocate or sedate. Doctor in charge, D. Carr. I stared at the page in disbelief. Emma wasn't unstable, as powerful, unpredictable, so her mother turned her into a ghost. A myth. A memory erased from both record and reality. At that moment, Emma placed her hand on the open folder, and for the first time, she spoke with a voice that was both hers and somehow not. I don't remember who I was before the mirrors, but I remember everyone else. All of them, inside me. Her fingers trembled, tears spilled from her eyes, but not just for herself. For every child who had sat in that chair, every scream the walls had absorbed, every life swallowed by silence. And then she took the folder in both hands and set it on fire. Flames lit up the archive like a funeral pyre for forgotten souls, the paper curling into ash, the truth finally burning free from the shackles of secrecy. We didn't try to stop her. We left the lower wing as smoke coiled behind us, taking the past with the stairs. Into the morning light, Delia was gone. No trace, no footprints, only her coat, folded neatly on the bench outside with a single note pinned to it. She was never a monster. I was. Forgive me. Emma never returned to the building. He moved to a quiet place by the sea. Ma visits her often, and sometimes. When the sky turns pale and the wind grows still, Emma whispers the names of those she once remembered, not from memory but from feeling. She never went back to who he became something more, something stronger, a ghost, a mirror, a survivor. And apartment 14B, it's still empty, sometimes at night. Residents say they hear a girl humming, in sorrow, in peace. In the months that followed, the building returned to a quiet rhythm, doors opening and closing to the familiar sounds of everyday life. Packages were delivered, stairwells echoed with footsteps again, and laughter returned to the halls. But apartment 14B remained untouched, unclaimed, a quiet monument to everything that had unfolded. Some tenants asked the landlord to finally list it for rent. Others avoided it entirely, and no one could quite agree on what they believed had happened there, only that it had changed them all. Mia moved out shortly after her mother disappeared. Didn't take much. Just a few boxes, a photograph, and a journal she'd begun to keep. Filled with letters to a sister she was only beginning to understand. Visits Emma every weekend. They don't talk about the past much, sometimes. They sit by the window in Emma's small cottage by the sea, drink warm tea, and listen to the waves roll in. In the silence between them, healing happens, not loudly, not perfectly, easy enough. Emma has started painting again. Our walls are covered with color, vivid landscapes, smiling figures, children running barefoot through fields that never end. And mirrors? There are none. Says she doesn't need them anymore. Sees herself clearly now. Reflected in the people who never gave up on. Building 2 has begun to breathe again. A landlord sealed off the Lower East Wing permanently. No one speaks of what was found there. Files, machines, truth. The echoes have faded, like air feels lighter. And at night, the humming that once haunted the halls has quieted into something softer. A lullaby, maybe, a memory. And me? I kept a copy of the report, not to expose to punish the people who fail. Remember. To remind myself that sometimes the greatest mysteries are not crimes to be solved, but wounds to be understood, that behind every locked door is not always a killer, but a child. A secret, a story desperate to be heard. Sometimes, I walk past the building, stand across the street, and look up at the windows, now filled with the warm yellow glow of ordinary lives. Families, quiet dinners. I always stop at 1-4, and every time, without fail, I see it, just for a moment. A flicker of movement. A girl standing by the window, no longer hiding, just watching, and lost, forgotten. Finally, free. Some doors were never meant to be opened. But sometimes, it's the only way to let the light in.